WWT presents Experts.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of WWT Experts. I'm your host, Matthew Coble, as always. And today we're going to be talking about life sciences with two experts from Worldwide Technology. And the life sciences industry is really undergoing a significant shift with 33% of investment dollars expected to go towards artificial intelligence by 2025. And the surge in AI adoption is driving an increased need for high-performance architectures to power genomics, proteomics, and other data-intensive research that's going on in the industry. So to that end, we're going to talk to two experts today about how organizations and our clients and others in the market are taking advantage of cloud and other technologies for high-performance architectures, and now that's sort of playing out within those businesses. So first up, we have Dr. Sanaz, who is Chief Healthcare Advisor and Global Life Sciences Practice Lead with us here at Worldwide Technology. Dr. Cortez began her career as a physician and a medical director with Providence Health. And since then, she's been an entrepreneur, an investor, a venture advisor, and an industry expert in the healthcare and life sciences fields. We're delighted to have her with us today to talk about this topic. Also with us is Derrick Monahan, who is a Principal Solutions Architect with Worldwide Technology. And Derrick has over 20 years of experience across a range of technologies, including networking, mobility, collaboration, and infrastructure. And more recently, he's been focused on cloud architectures, analytics, in the sort of broader sense of high-performance architectures and the environments there needed to support artificial intelligence. He's been actively involved in leading the growth of our AI Proving Ground within Worldwide Technology's Advanced Technology Center. I invite you to check that out at WWT.com. And of course, Derrick, too, like Sanaz, has experience in the life sciences industry. So some great knowledge from each of them to share today. Hey, thanks for coming. We're glad you're here.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, appreciate it. Glad to be here.
Well, let's jump in. So, Sanaz, I want to start with you. So tell us some about the industry trends and insights that you're seeing going on relative to modern infrastructures and what life sciences organizations really need to deliver on the AI solutions they're pursuing.
Yeah, thanks, Matt. So, about a third of CIO investments in life sciences will be in AI. And so obviously it's one of the top workloads driving all these infrastructure decisions. And really the goal is the organizations want to operationalize AI faster and with less complexity. So obviously with that kind of overarching goal, this is a modernization effort that's going to go beyond computing models, right? And we need to factor in things like scalable data infrastructures and advanced networking capabilities and data governance, compliance frameworks, security. And so there's all that kind of swimming around in the background and some of the forefront. And so as we factor that all in and think about the question at hand, these are data-intensive workloads overall, and they're increasingly being run in the cloud. In the last few years, I would say we've seen a big shift that direction because of, there's data silos, there's data volumes that are imploding, there's access and collaboration factors, and these are driving IT leaders to make changes and identify solutions for more integrated view, if you will, across their data and one that can scale. And so as a result, the cloud market started growing for this industry, growing twice as fast as the on-premise solutions. And so, but then of course these brings different financial models compared to those traditional budgets that their people are accustomed to. And some say, analysis shows longer term equalization and even cost savings, but then that becomes a factor. And so we're seeing a lot of organizations who are all in on cloud, kind of moving away from that absolute statement and returning some workloads back on premise and, further adopting some hybrid cloud strategies for all of the reasons I just listed. So there's no, single answer. It's dynamic, as everything always is in life sciences, but that's sort of the background. And then, we can't forget the two additional considerations that apply to a unique industry like life sciences, because it's really two businesses in one. It's a manufacturing, business, and it's an R&D business. And so when we look at it that way, then there's the complexity around architecture for manufacturing. These factories are autonomous, they are siloed. There's an integration of edge and cloud resources that allows, for them to be more self-governing. And more organizations are integrating AI and machine learning directly into the edge devices. So in that scenario, cloud of any sort is not necessarily front line here, right? It's a completely different model, which poses other headaches or considerations for the CIO. And yet there's this big push in the industry, rightfully so, for reasons around security and data, of how to integrate the OT and the IT businesses of a life science organization. So again, kind of circling back, it's hybrid, it's adaptable models that are the types of things that are really required. And then when I mentioned it's like two businesses, right? There's the R&D component. We've got a lot of different people who need to access that data and perform those workloads. We've got researchers, and these research tools that they all use have to somehow be positioned in some sort of shared compute environment. And the environments have to be flexible with storage, right? They have to be flexible per researcher's need, how much they need to store, how quickly they need to, how quickly the environment needs to be able to meet those demands. And then there's a lot of collaboration. I mean, all organizations have collaboration, obviously, internally, but these are high IP, high security, very sensitive sources of data that need to be available for collaboration, not just within the organization, but with all the strategic partners that, biopharma works with, like the CROs or, nonprofit research organizations, academic institutions, consultancies. So, these are all, again, sort of complexities that go into, forming the decisions, around infrastructure roadmap moving forward. But Derrick, I'm not sure if you want to add anything to that.
Yeah, no, it's a great call out, and I think I love the word dynamic because it's a really it's not just in IT in general in this market and this kind of landscape. It's really across what's evolving, and we're thinking about things like high performance computing. I'm just going to call that out because you brought up also a key word is we're seeing the same thing happening with customers that they may start in the cloud because they're building out, they're looking at an AI studio type, essentially an AI world. They're looking at maybe an AI studio to test, validate, strategize on their initial use cases, but they eventually need to move what we think as a factory or a complete holistic deployment model that's a full stack. And so when we look at the HPC market, see what's happening, we talk a lot about build versus buy. And the considerations that are involved, deployment strategy and the needs of our outcomes, we actually have built our own decision tree because customers, it's such a complicated landscape and it's evolving and very dynamic, as you mentioned. We have to think about the life cycle of the customer, where they're going to be at in 3 to 5 years, and then where to put AI. And so really, at the end of the day, we're not saying a build or buy versus buy. It's more about this hybrid strategy that's leading the pack. 2 years ago, for example, we were seeing roughly about 32% of HPC customers in a single public cloud. Today, it's almost that what's happened is we're seeing the hybrid model overlap that and surpass that. So hybrid, to what we're referring to in this case, is the on-premise plus public cloud example. And that's what we're seeing as a kind of a key trend. And so that hybrid approach, I'll use genomics research as an example. The demand for high performance computing is just exploding, and the number of devices is actually rapidly growing. So we need to think about how do we scale that as customers grow. The initial capital investments in some cases have been also too expensive for some businesses. So we're seeing a new trend in terms of that hybrid strategy is HPC or platform as a service. So it really becomes, dependent on the customer's outcomes, their budget, the analysis, where they're expanding, and we look at all these various factors. But definitely, hybrid is one of the key growing areas. And whether it's a platform as a service or, they're building it in a fashion that can be easily managed and supported, almost like a turnkey solution, is really where we're seeing some of those trends going. So I'll let you. Matt, I don't know if you had a question or do you want to jump in there?
Yeah, so I would like to, we talked a little bit at the top here about the idea of high performance architectures. So I would love for each of you to speak more about that. And I'm thinking both technically, what do we mean by high performance architectures, but also from a business operations sort of use case model standpoint in the industry, how is that concept fitting in and how are people moving forward with it?
No, that's a great question. And a lot of times, high performance, we talk about high performance computing or maybe high performance networking. Well, these are just components of what we think about as what's called high performance architecture. And in that, there's a lot of misconceptions as well, because it does include the software stack, at least parts of it. And so I'll give an example. Worldwide, we think about HPA as essentially a full stack approach to supporting all the use cases that we'll talk about here in a second. And the 5 key areas we think about of HPA is essentially the high performance computing. Now, historically, a lot of HPC or high performance computing was the big bucket for that. Now, really, it's expanding into, we're seeing this everywhere, accelerated computing. So there are a lot more GPUs in this case, but there's also emergent computing and heterogeneous computing that's evolving as well. And so when we think of high performance computing, it really involves all those areas and even quantum computing, which is it's a whole different discussion. We probably want to set some time for that. That's maybe a future discussion. But most importantly is customers need flexibility in their compute infrastructure, and it's not just a single one piece or one component all approach. It's really looking at multiple heterogeneous environments and customers where they can leverage the cloud with unique accelerated compute in the cloud that cloud providers provide. Could be ASICs or TPUs. On-prem, we see a lot of GPUs as well as in the cloud, but that also translates into, we have high performance storage, which Dr. Cortez alluded on this and talked about it, a data platform. What's a modern data platform? That's really one of the key challenges we need to solve for as data is exploding in this this life sciences and this pharmaceutical world we live in. It's really one of the key drivers, and it needs to be tied extremely well to their compute strategy. Third, we have high performance networking. And fourth, we think about this together as a kind of an orchestration. How do we orchestrate all these components that are thought of as separate stacks, but really it's one stack? We need to think about how do we make it easy for our data scientists to maybe open a Jupyter notebook, launch their underlying infrastructure, whether it's in the cloud or on-prem, and get along and move forward with their work and their development and experiments. And the fifth area of HPA, which gets overlooked, what you think is one of the most important areas, is if you're deploying this on-prem in a hybrid story, you need to think about your data center and your power. And we know we work with customers that have done assessments and advise on this area. It has to be thought months, sometimes years in advance, and sometimes 12 months is not enough. You need to think forward, and how do we expand the power, space, and cooling strategy within the data center? So those are the key areas. But I think more importantly is, we don't start and think about the architecture in HPA. We start with the use cases, and the outcomes, the use cases are really the most important factor here. So then we walk our way back into the architecture, and then we really eventually figure out, okay, what's the right architecture for this particular custom that's tailored and designed for that unique use case and outcome. So Dr. Cortez, I know you've been doing this for a long time. I'd love to hear your thoughts, maybe a few examples of the use cases you're seeing and how this ties back into the architecture.
Yeah, absolutely. And happy to do that. And just to circle back to Matt's point about kind of what's the overarching business challenges, opportunities that are driving some of this around HPA, at the end of the day, it's also the experience, right? We've got all these complexities of IT that Derrick can rattle off acronyms and such, but when I'm talking to scientists and researchers, for them, it's just about the experience, right? And then for the overall company charter, it's to accelerate science, right? To get more therapeutics out. And so when we kind of put that lens on, it's so simple. A scientist doesn't want to have to run experiments, save, things on their desktop, and then have to delete things because there's there's not enough storage. And then if they need to go back and pull a file, it's an archive and, they can't get to it, or, the tools that they have aren't compatible with the software and hardware decisions that are, being made, and it's not being explained to them why we're like shifting them over to this other thing. And then they don't want to have a third party involved every time, right? I mean, these are folks that come in at like midnight because a part of a lab, step involves very timed things that need to be done, or, the lab technicians come in. And so really needing to rely on other people like data scientists and others it's a new model for them, right? And so new is always challenging. And so as these complex decisions, the tech decisions that Derrick is alluding to are being made, it's really important that the business, right? The experience of the users and the business are kind of considered in the whole journey. And that's often where we see a disconnect, right? And so my team, my practice, that's where we really focus, is sort of like translating these challenges. But yeah, I mean, to your point, right? Like, you don't start with HPA, you start with the use cases. So virtually any part of that early drug discovery journey has its own unique requirements that are going to dictate sort of where your architecture needs to go. So, as we identify leads, for example, there's a component of where we need to, run through huge chemical libraries of compounds to try to, get to that potential hit compound. And then as we try to move that to an optimized lead, there are parts of the in silico modeling that involve, molecular simulations, right? And they have to optimize these lead compounds. And so that involves very special hardware, computational requirements, where we're looking at different, GPUs, than traditional machine learning. So, that's another component. And then, I alluded to that AI is now expanding, obviously, across other lines of business. So with clinical trials, we're back to maybe some typical, machine learning models, but interpreting these sort of massive amounts of data that are being generated. But the data is different, right? Some of it's biometric now, some of it's contextual, some of it's historic. And that, I think, informs some of the decisions. And then, marketing, sales, regulatory, they are later to adopt these technologies, but they're adopting them rapidly, right? I mean, it used to be that NLP was where it was at. And now, we're expanding to, we're doing data analytics, machine learning, but now we're looking at new jobs that the software can do for the organization around, Gen AI, right? These are new jobs. So how can that be factored in and be democratized? And again, all the barriers I listed earlier being considered around, user experience. So I just threw 6 use cases at you, so you can pick whichever ones you want to hit on for your answer.
Yeah.
No, those are excellent examples. Yeah, and I think there's sort of a theme there too. Thinking through like HPA and architecture, and thinking through. You mentioned these large chemical libraries, and I think this is incredibly large. But if you can fathom the 10 to the 63rd power of drug-like molecules that exist, and what we're seeing is these pharmaceutical companies are trying to, or some of our customers even are trying to move from 100,000 to 100 million, maybe 100 billion. And analyze all those. And so the scale is accelerating. How do you keep up with that? So from an architecture perspective, I think data-driven decisions really matter. So organizations need better integration, data integrations, and that's what's really important. They still have their existing clusters. They have their HPC, maybe their computing and analytics and scientific computing infrastructure, but all this data, there's a lot of integrations that now have to happen. That could be harmonizing clinical, genomic, and proteomic data. This obviously helps accelerate the drug discovery. Also, improving the precision is very important, and minimizing side effects for the patients. So, I think about oncology as an example, just from a personal note in my family. So, I think about also the scientific discovery has evolved beyond the legacy storage. That's why we call it high performance storage. And I'm thinking about, like, for example, genomic sequences to imaging. Genomic sequencing, for example, I think produces about 30 times more data than exome sequencing. In like technologies, we talk to customers about cryo-ET. They're replacing cryo-EM with payloads. The data payloads are now 10 times larger. So with this exponential growth, how do we manage this? It's just straining the existing infrastructure. At the same time, trying to keep in demand, and actually with the machine learning models and AI now integrated to it and collaboration, there's lack of this cloud integration, as we talked about cloud earlier. So there's data silos and fragmented systems, and the unoptimized workflows, they slow down. So we need to think about this. We need an advanced infrastructure solution now becomes very urgent. So by unifying like structured and unstructured data, which are both important in the life sciences, and limiting those silos, and obviously providing the scalability performance required to manage the growing data sets, I think that's going to be incredibly important. Also integrating with cloud, not just from a storage and data perspective, but how do I think about it from an admin perspective and actually day two operations? How do we have a single pane of glass for managing that environment from on-prem to cloud? That's very important, especially when you're enabling real-time data and also, help accelerating that innovation. So those are just some examples, and we could talk about case studies too all day, but at the end of the day, customers are wanting, fast, extreme performance. They need almost limitless case scalability. And in the data world, you need really a multi-protocol support. We're seeing that across other industries as well, where the storage environment is intelligent enough to take understand different protocols because the workloads and the integrations are varying. The data is all over the place, and it's really important to integrate with those existing and future storage environments. So those are just some examples, and as we look through the kind of the architecture and tying it back into the use cases, that we think data strategy, and also data, looking at modern data storage solutions is incredibly important to the picture.
This episode is brought to you by VAST, the world's first data computing platform designed to serve as the foundation for AI automated discovery. VAST is creating simple solutions to make data more meaningful and help organizations around the world unlock radical intelligence and utility.
Well, Derrick, I want to build on a little bit of what you were just talking about in terms of the continual evolution of this space, because I imagine that you've worked with some clients and seen other organizations out in the marketplace who kind of set up an architecture with a certain portfolio of use cases in mind, but now they need to sort of expand that even further, add new use cases, layer in more and more AI. So how are you counseling them to kind of evolve the architectures they have to that right future state so they can carry on with all the many use cases that are coming along?
No, great question. And let me give you some examples, and I'm going to think about this. I'm going to present this in a unique way, not just from a technical perspective. I'm going to talk about three key areas and break it down into three key parts. But we are seeing customers, they start small. In this space in life sciences, small means something different. They might start with 1,000 GPUs, for example, which is a pretty large environment to many of our customers. But then they need to scale to 2,000 or up to 10 to 20,000 GPUs over time, and that's how important it is. It's not a simple thing to accomplish, going from kind of a large to a triple X, this kind of environment, because it's so important to ensure that can scale over time. As you mentioned, use cases are expanding. So the way you think about it, I think that one of the most important factors that we already talked about, the use cases, which is one of those three components. The other one is the organizational and cultural aspect, which from experience and when we're helping our customers, there's a lot of fundamental differences within an organization on what they mean by, flexibility, or what they mean by scale, or what they mean by how we're going to leverage this, whether it's a kind of a homogeneous environment where you have all GPUs and a large, giant as-a-service model that's flexible to accomplish, accommodate many different use cases, or is it a heterogeneous environment because the customer's still doing their important HPC workloads, their scientific computing, and all these require different environments. But it's really important that there's a fundamental shift in how different specialists, from biologists and informaticians, can collaborate. We think about it at a very high level. We take data scientists, we think about those domain experts I just mentioned, and the IT organization. They have to be in sync and all in step in the strategy. And I think that's one of the most important things when you're building this architecture and scaling. Early engagement, that means, you're actually together, you're fostering that collaboration between these different experts at the early stages of planning and design. That will translate into a very well thought out, scalable architecture. And so, what they're doing, data visualization or refinement of their analysis, or doing some drug discovery type algorithms that they're building, it's really important they have a value-driven, clear definition and alignment on those projects. And then finally, there's shared accountability. We think that's important as the organization. So you think about the biological and computational teams, they have to share responsibility for those outcomes. I'll give an example. We recently helped a customer in this space, and really one of the key success factors in their scale and the building the correct architecture. Again, we didn't start with architecture. We started with the business and IT leadership. We're making sure they were aligned. And that fed into building a product strategy and actually developing the proper use case or use cases, which turned into, now we need to build that product or platform that addresses all those use cases that we've just discussed. And then Obviously, you have to bring along the data and data strategy. Finally, there's all that, think of that day two, and not only that, but the experience that Dr. Cortez just brought up, and the user experience, that's incredibly important. You can't disrupt their workflows. And finally, based on all that, we were able to build out the right technology, our high performance architecture. So I'm really tying three things in there, the high performance architecture, the organizational cultural aspect, and the use cases all together. And that is really the most successful way to think through this, and instead of just focusing on just technology and aligning it. So that's just a few examples there. And I'll kind of I know, Dr. Cortez, I know we could probably go further into this and really go in depth about where this expands, but I know you've been doing this for a long time, and I know you have there's other layers to this, aren't there? There's things that just go beyond the research and development. I just want to get your thoughts there.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, great summary there. Thank you for that. But yeah, I mentioned earlier, the rapid adoption of AI into, the other lines of business. And, we've hit on some of those more than once now. So I think that's kind of there. But really, what's being asked of these architecture teams is to be like innovators every day, right? Like constant innovation requirement, because the expansion is coming from things that, like you're kind of thinking, wow, that's interesting and true. And maybe we weren't aware of all the different touch points that has on other things that are happening. But I'll give you some examples, right? Like modernizing your M&A and D, right? Like that is a huge priority for growth going into 2025, mergers, acquisitions, and divestitures. And so how do we leverage all of these, tools, these AI approach, the AI approach that's being used in R&D and clinical? How can we put that mindset to that effort, right? How do we modernize the way we're approaching M&A, just data strategy, infrastructure, et cetera. And then, the implosion of real world evidence. We need to continuously innovate on how we're consuming, interpreting, and then Matt talked about like you're expanding, right? You're going from, this volume to this volume. That's a space that's imploding. And then, another huge initiative is the supply chain. So now needs to be incorporated into these modern approaches of leveraging AI and how to support that on the back end. And then, security. That's at every step of the way, resilience and security, again, high value IP, an industry that has a high, breach rate as it is. And then all the complexities like OT in your factory being attacked, all the industrial, vector sites. So yeah, beyond just the lines of business that we've been talking about, there's these other kind of use cases that span more than one line of business and are kind of, on that cutting edge of innovation. So as these applications expand and, these new domains are being talked about, again, like the demand for scale and flexibility, as you mentioned, is increasing.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, we've touched on, some of the challenges that the industry is facing, some solutions, many of the use cases that are out there. I'm curious, as you talk with clients who either kind of getting underway with this or they may be farther down the line with all that we're talking about today, what are some of the best practices, the key best practices you're sharing with those clients so they can do excellent work?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think Derrick's going to be best suited to kind of go into the methodology and the answer to that. But I do want to once again sort of bring us back to that big picture and how that's going to feed into this answer, right? So at the end of the day, what pharma is doing and what we all want pharma to do, again, is to accelerate science, right? Discover more therapies, bring more therapeutics to market as quickly and safely as possible, right? And so people need more game-changing solutions like Casgevy, for example, right? They want that, but without that 12-year timeline. This is a groundbreaking gene-edited cell therapy. It's using CRISPR. It's the first FDA-approved therapeutic of its kind, and it's great, and we need hundreds more like that, right? So at the end of the day, again, speed, safety, volume, and then doing it in a cost-effective way that's sustainable for these companies to continue to want to invest in these high-value solutions. And so that's really what drives all of us, right? In the biopharma ecosystem, wherever we are in our day-to-day work, it's what it's about. And so that North Star is kind of guiding all the tactical business decisions, including infrastructure. And so just optimizing that high performance architecture, we can do more with lower stakes and better outcomes. So just kind of resetting that before we go more into the tactical component. But Derrick, I'll let you dive into some of that.
Yeah, no, thanks. I think, and there's obviously both are needed. So I always like to think when I'm putting together, the thought around, it's really about matching the customer's deployment strategy to their needs. And so we think about, again, where do I place these workloads? Where do I, again, that hybrid story comes back into play, but data sensitivity. I'm going to go through a few examples that I think are best practices and considerations. And one of those is the data sensitivity we talked about, a little bit in the security sense. So data sensitivity and control, there's a lot of obviously sensitive or regulated data. And that's where we see a lot of customers looking at more of a build strategy or a hybrid strategy where the data is close as possible, for example, to their AI. They're not moving data around and transferring and moving data. One example, though, and you brought up a great, I think, example too, Dr. Cortez, was around, I think, the manufacturing part of life sciences, and that's a whole environment within itself is moving data. They have to, share data and move data sometimes, but we have to be careful not to, expose that data, and also we have need proper security of it. So compliance requirements, thinking through that AI security. And security for AI strategy is really important. So that's tied to the data sensitivity. At the same time, customers don't realize there's a lot of customization and integration, especially in the life sciences. So there's a lot more control, a lot of customization, but they need the flexibility as well for the infrastructure to match that customization. So with customization, and we have some customers that we work with that are they have developed their own frameworks. Sometimes off-the-shelf frameworks make sense, but that customized framework might work better for them. They have the capability, the skills, and the researchers to develop that. So there's a lot of more integration and customization, and how that's done really is important. So whether it's off-the-shelf framework that you can leverage to speed up science or develop your own, that customization is definitely a key part. I can't stress enough facilities infrastructure. If there is an on-prem component to it and there is a hybrid, which we're seeing most of our customers approaching, it may be a co-location they look into, but at the same time, a lot of our life science customers are looking to expand their data center to support more GPUs or more infrastructure and more storage, and obviously the networking comes along with that. And obviously the compute is really a key part of that. How do we support that in the future? So air-cooled environments aren't necessarily going to be the only answer. I think it's always going to be a hybrid, if you will, with air-cooled and liquid-cooled, but facilities infrastructure is incredibly important, and we're helping advise on matching that as we figure out their strategy. And then time to market. So what I mean by that is if you don't have like a development environment with the latest, compute or the latest storage and our data platforms, we have our one called the AI Proving Ground as an example that can be leveraged, whether it's ours or yours, or one that you can leverage in the cloud. It's really does help validate, test not just performance but feature functionality, and more importantly that integration that has to be thought through. So those integrations is a common ask we get is how do we integrate with our existing environment? And so we have a lot of legacy or older equipment and infrastructure as well as the latest and greatest to really bring all those together as they migrate into whether the cloud is or on-prem or hybrid. And then finally, latency and performance. I mean, obviously there's a lot of inference being done, and how do we, increase that, and ensure that it's done at, either whether it's batch or real time, definitely that, especially if your data's in the cloud, how do we address those challenges? So again, cost and technical expertise underlying from a business standpoint are all factors that wrap around that to make sure that it's done cost effectively. But those are just some examples, and we have many others we go into in our workshops, but I just want to pause because we think those are the 5 most important ones.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, last question for you both. Based on the conversation today, your deep expertise, if you look out a year, 2 years, 5 years, what's one outcome you're really excited to see from everything that we're talking about?
Yeah, I would have to say, yeah.
I'll let you jump in here.
Yeah, I would have to say, precision medicine and personalized therapies, right? So many investments are being, directed towards these therapeutic areas like antibody drug, conjugates and gene therapies. And so I think this advancement in precision medicine and personalized treatments is going to change how we've done things just dramatically, right? I mean, kids are going to look back, our kids are going to look back in, 10, 15 years and think, wow, they used to do one size fits all. And look now, the majority of how, therapy is developed and implemented is much more personalized. And I think that's going to be a real game changer. So that would be my one that I'd vote for that answer. But
excellent.
Derrick, curious to hear your thoughts.
Derrick, how about you?
Yeah, no, great question. It's hard to answer, honestly. There's so many innovative areas accelerating so fast. I think I just want to pause because precision medicine is actually a passion of mine, and I love the answer Dr. Cordes gave. And I think with precision medicine is, or any of the examples we talked about today, really it's thinking about how do we address, like in the precision medicine example, there's so much, prescriptive guidance that we're going to have to understand, that whether it's the genomic sequence of that individual or, down to some of the other behavioral and environmental aspects, and combining that all into some kind of prescribed, way to treat that patient. It requires some amazing, powerful compute. As we know, quantum is something I brought up earlier, and I think that's going to be a very interesting play in the future. We're already seeing some incredible efficiencies with the compute today, especially faster and more and really intelligent algorithms that are coming out in ways to train and develop that in the AI world. But I think quantum is one that I think we're going to see more sooner than later. But there's still some challenges we got to get around with that. That's going to not be overnight. Obviously, we're still looking at several years, many years away from really providing some concrete examples. But that's where I'd come from, is that really is going to help address what Dr. Cordes just mentioned.
Cool. Love it. Well, hey, thank you both for sharing your expertise with us today.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
And thank you for joining us as well. This is one of several episodes we have on life sciences, so check those out. And we've got a great catalog of content, video that you can watch anytime out there on WWT.com. We'll also love to hear your feedback, so take the survey, drop us an email, and let us know how you like the show. And with that, we'll wrap today, and we'll see you next time.